Okay, we're going to be modifying a Canon EOS Rebel T4i, and we start by making sure that we've removed the SD card and the battery. Okay. We'll slide the viewfinder cover up, put it aside, and I also keep the back of the T4i closed to protect the screen while we work on it. At the bottom of the camera there are 4 screws that need to be removed first. That's 1. 2. 3. And 4. Now these screws are a different size, so I'm taping them to a screw sheet that you can print out from my website, garyhonis.com. So on reassembly, we know exactly where they go back on the camera. Now on the side of the camera, there's this rubber grippy material. Now, it is on there with an adhesive backing. If you just lift up one of the corners, you'll see that it's peeling off. Careful not to rip it. So we can see here how it's just peeling right off the side of the camera. There's the sticky backing, and that's with it removed. We'll put that aside. Now on this side of the camera there are 1, 2, 3, 4 screws that need to be removed. And on the T4i model, what Canon has done is moved away from using standard Phillips head screws and is now using torque screws like they do on the sensor. So we'll use a T7 torque driver and remove those 4 screws. Now on the T4i, these screws are all the same size. On the T3i model, there is one of the 4 screws that's longer than the others. Okay, all 4 screws have now been removed. We will tape those to the screw sheet. Now on the opposite side of the camera there are 2 Phillips head screws, so we'll remove those now. Now the top one is longer than the bottom one. So we tape those to the screw sheet. Now the other screws we would like to remove is next to the viewfinder here, and they're 2 small screws. We'll place those on the screw sheet and tape them there. Now on this side of the camera we should remove this plastic cover over the ports first. Now there's some rubber catches that are pliable, and it's just a matter of lifting this off and putting it away in a sealed container. And now we're ready to remove the camera back, but we'll do one additional thing, and that's here on this rubber grippy piece. We'll lift it up and remove it. Put it in a sealed container with the other parts. Now we're ready to remove the camera back. Now do this very carefully. I stick my fingernails in here and then on this side, and just give it enough pressure to pop it open slightly. Okay, you hear that pop? Now you want to be careful here, because we will find that the camera back is still connected by two ribbon cables. This one is a pop-off ribbon connector, so if you get our fingernail under that, you can just pop it right up. Now the other's a little trickier to remove. What I do is use a very small flathead jeweler's screwdriver, and I pry up one corner of the connector. Up, it pops right out. Okay, and we'll put that away in a sealed container. Now we can see the inside of the T4i camera, circuit board, and its ribbon cable connectors, and we'll be working on that next. On my online instructions, I have these ribbon cables lettered in sequence, starting with ribbon cable A. So we'll start there, and these ribbon cable connectors have hinges, black hinge right here, that can be flipped up to release the ribbon cable, and then with a toothpick we can remove the ribbon cable from its connector. That was ribbon cable A. This will be ribbon cable B. Again, we pop up the little hinge to release the ribbon cable and pull back the ribbon cable. Now this white connector here is an audio connector, and it's really a slide in slide out type of connector. What I'm going to use is sharp tweezers to grab the edge of the connector firmly and wiggle it out of its position. There it comes out there. So with that removed, the ribbon cable D in sequence is the one going to the sensor here, and it's just a pop off. If we get our fingernails underneath the connector, we can pop it off. Ribbon cable E is on the edge of the circuit board here. We pop up the hinge and release that ribbon cable out of its connector. So you have A, B, C, D, and E done. Ribbon cable F is just a pop-off connector, so we'll just pop that off with our fingernails. Just pop straight up. The next connector is, we release the hinge and take the ribbon cable out, like so. And the one under it, it's a little difficult to see here. We do the same. Pop up the hinge on the connector, and with our toothpick remove the ribbon cable. There's one other ribbon cable under this connector on the very edge of the board. I know it's difficult to see, but we're going to remove that next. We pop up the black hinge and release the ribbon. So now we have all ribbon cables disconnected, but there's one more edge connector, and it's this white connector here. Now, in order to release it, we can use a small Phillips screwdriver, and fortunately on the male part of the connector there are end tabs that we can use, and again there are tabs on both ends of the connector, and we just slide it up like that till it's disconnected. You can see how it's disconnected here. So now we have all ribbon cables disconnected, and what we're going to have to do next, because in order to get the upper right screw on a circuit board and the upper left sensor screw, is in this T4i model we have to remove the top of the camera and the front and bottom of the camera, and we'll do that next. And we'll begin with the diopter adjustment screw. It's a Phillips head screw, so we just remove it and place it to the side, tape it on the screw sheet. That removed, we'll turn the camera around, and there are 3 screws that need to be removed. 2 on the front of the camera right here. So we'll remove those now. And the other. And we'll tape those to the screw sheet. The other screw is at the bottom of the camera right here. So those 2 previous screws and this screw are the same size screws. We tape that screw to the screw sheet with the other 2. Now, before we get to the bottom, we need to remove 2 screws at the top of the camera, near the camera straps. One is here, okay, and that's a very short screw, and then on the other side by the camera strap is here, and this is a longer screw. We tape both of those to the screw sheet. On the bottom of the camera there are 2 screws that need to be removed by the battery door. But the battery door can be easily removed by just wiggling a little bit. It comes off its hinges. We put it aside, and then we remove the final 2 screws near the battery door. They are both the same size screws. So with those screws removed, we tape them the screw sheet. Alright, at this point we're going to remove the front of the camera. Now to remove the front, if you take a small flathead driver and go near the camera tripod and insert your flathead driver there and lift up a little bit, notice how the front of the body pops forward. Okay, now you can remove this whole front by grabbing a hold of it. There's some sticky tape under it, but that's it removed. Okay, there's the front of the camera, and that was the sticky tape that was holding it on a little bit. So there's the front of the camera. Now we'll place it like so, and be very careful when you're handling the camera, because you want to avoid the flash capacitor, which is here, which can maintain a charge for a very long time after the battery is removed. But slowly I'm going to lift the top of the camera. I'm going to slide it up to reveal this the other two screws we need to get to. Now one is this screw here on the corner of the circuit board, upper right hand corner, so we'll remove that one now. And next screw will be this one here on the lower right edge of the circuit board. Okay, it's removed. Now there are 3 screws remaining on the circuit board. One here, one here, one here, and we'll remove those next. Starting with this one. These are shorter screws. One there. This is the second screw. And then the final screw is located here. And those 3 screws we will tape so we don't lose them to the screw sheet. Now we have our circuit board loosened. To remove the circuit board, you can put your fingers on each side of the circuit board itself and remove it like so. Now we'll put that circuit board away in a sealed container. Handle it very carefully. Now we have our circuit board removed from the camera, so we can see our sensor here. The sensor has a ribbon cable connection right here, so we'll want to remove that next. And I use rubber tipped tweezers for that. I go at an angle and gently slide that ribbon cable out of its white connector, like so. Next we'll be removing actually three ground screws in the T4i. There's one located here, one here, and one here. Now these screws have broader heads than the other screws we've been working with, and they're very easy to remove. One, and here's the second ground screw. And the third ground screw here. And we tape all 3 ground screws to the screw sheet. We're going to be working with the sensor itself now, and the sensor is held in position. Well, I'm going to move this audio cable out of the way there a little bit. The sensor is held inside the camera. It's actually mounted inside the camera by 3 adjustment torque screws. One here, one here, and one here. And if you'll notice in this camera, Canon has used some kind of red adhesive on each of the 3 screws. They're spring loaded, and they do that. The torque screws don't come out of adjustment. So one of the first things we're going to do is use a razor knife to scratch off that red adhesive, and that's going to take a while. I'll show you how it's done here. As I'm scraping it, it's sort of flaking off. And you can use your tweezers to remove the pieces of adhesive that are scraped off, or you can use a blower's bulb to remove it better. So I'm going to do that for all 3 screws, and it's going to take a little time. Okay, I've now scraped off all of the red adhesive off the torque screw locations. I'm going to blow any of the red adhesive particles outside of the camera body. Now it's very important when you modify a camera, before we remove the sensor, that we note the location of these 3 sensor adjustment screws. They are spring-loaded, so we need to return them to their original positions. There's a few ways to do this. I'm going to use 2 methods here. Okay, one is using a ultrafine point Sharpie to mark the existing locations, and I do that by drawing a line on the screw head itself, and I continue the line onto the metal tab that's below it. So it gives us an indicator mark for returning the screw to its original location. I'm going to do that on all 3 torque screws. Okay, so I've marked that second one. The idea being, if we return the screw to a position where those 2 black lines match, we will have gotten it back to the original position. Now this is a little harder one to get at here, but I'm going to mark it as well, upper right hand corner. There we go. Now all 3 torque screws have been marked with black lines. Another way to measure that is to look how far the black plastic tab protrudes through the hole. Okay, we can measure that distance. You can use a micrometer for that. Now what I've made up are gauge strips, as so. This one I have marked as 650D, which is the T4i, strip number 2. And I use these gauge strips. At the very bottom of the gauge strip there's a black area, and that measures the distance of how far the black plastic post should protrude through the sensor. And so I check that, and I find, yeah, I'm good there, and I'm good on that sensor screw. It's perfect. But on the 3rd sensor screw, it's not the right size. So I have a separate strip for that, and it's called 650D number 1 strip, and it's not as high of a black area, but if I check it, yeah, it's even with the very top of the post. So that's perfect. So I will use those strips as an additional aid for returning the sensor screws to their original position. Okay, next we just need to, now that we have our sensor screws marked, we just need to remove the sensor itself. And again, I'm going to lift up the top of the camera to get at this sensor screw here. And we're going to be using a T7 Torx driver, which is the same that we used for the side screws on the T4i model. And we're going to completely remove each sensor screw and tape it in their positions on the screw sheet. Now we have to remember that that screw was in position number 1, and this screw is in position number 2, and we need to return them in their correct positions because we've marked them with the black indicator lines. So I put that one in, tape it into position number 2, and this rightmost one will be position number 3. Okay, again the sensor is spring loaded, so we notice that the sensor, as we removed all 3 screws, immediately popped up out of position, and at this point it's very easy to remove, like so. There's our sensor removed from the camera. And so we'll be working with the sensor now. With the sensor removed, there are 4 Phillips screws we'll be removing. The first 2 are on the ground strap itself, here and here. So let's remove those screws. I like to work with the sensor facing down to keep it as clean as possible. So this is the second screw on the ground strap. So we have those 2 screws removed. We're going to tape them on the screw sheet. Now to remove this metal clip frame that's holding in the frontmost filter, I'm going to place it flat on the table, and I'm going to use a small flathead driver. I'm going to hold down this top of this spring and get under each edge and apply a little pressure to release the clip from the small plastic black tabs at each corner. And with that, I can remove the metal filter frame like so, and put it aside in a sealed container. Now the original front filter can be seen here. This is the piezoelectric element on it, and that's the ribbon cable here. To remove this, we can grab it by its ribbon cable and just shift it forward. There we see the front filter has now been removed, and we'll put that away in a sealed container. Okay, next we're going to remove the second filter. That's the original IR cut filter in the camera. We'll remove it from its black plastic frame, but first we're going to remove the frame itself from the imaging sensor, and that is done with these 2 screws at this end, 2 Phillips screws. That's 1, that's 2. Now I'm going to hold the filter upside down. Now I'm doing that to help with keeping it free of dust, and using a small flathead driver, I'm going to pry up 3 opposite corners of the filter frame, or 2 opposite corners of the filter frame. There's one there. On the T4i, this filter frame is not adhesive onto the sensor itself, and if you hold the unit upside down, the filter frame will just slide right off like so. And notice I'm keeping the sensor upside down. With the sensor upside down, it'll keep it more dust free. And I'm going to put that sensor away in a sealed container. Okay, now we can see that this is the original IR cut filter that we want to remove from the camera with any type of modification, and it's glued in place at all 4 corners. And what Canon has used in the T4i model is what I've used for my camera mods, and that is a silicone type of glue. very rubbery glue that is easy to remove. So we'll just go on each of the 4 corners and slice through that glue with a razor knife. The glue is very soft and pliable. So there we have all 4 corners cut loose of that glue. What I'm going to do next is put a nitrile glove on my left hand. Now that the silicone glue has been cut loose on all 4 corners of the original filter, I pinch it with my nitrile gloves on and slowly push the matte black frame back on all 4 corners. The original filter itself has some adhesive, has like an adhesive tape around its entire perimeter, but working it a little bit at a time, we can see that it's easy to remove. There's that black filter gasket that was on it, and there's the empty filter frame now. So what we're going to do on the empty filter frame is any of the silicone glue that's in the 4 corners we want to remove so it doesn't stay inside in front of the camera sensor and create any future debris problems for us. So we'll work on each of these 4 corners of the filter frame to make sure that all of that silicone glue is removed. Now I'm just getting the largest of pieces out at this point, and then I'll follow this with a very close inspection in all 4 corners to be sure that all of the glue has been removed. And I'll work on that right now. Okay, now all the silicone glue has been removed in each of the 4 corners, making sure that it's dust free, and we'll put this filter frame away in a sealed container. Okay, let's talk a little bit about filters. These are Diopter filter boxes. All of these are filters that I found to be unacceptable for my camera mods. And that is one problem with the Diopter filters. They have optical imperfections. And depending on how bad they are, you may not want to use them. As opposed to the astronomic DSLR clear glass replacement filters, I haven't had any that have had any imperfections. So I don't know why the Diopters have the problems, but again, these are all bad filters, and that's one reason I prefer to do clear filter mods using an astronomic filter. We'll open one of these up. This Diopter filter that I was unable to use has a large pit near the center. Now with a Diopter filter modification, we would install the Diopter filter in its frame and glue the Diopter filter in all 4 corners and allow that filter to dry overnight outside of the camera body. We would use silicone glue for that. Once it's dry, we would need to add the original front LPF1 filter with the piezoelectric element like that, and use the metal clip frame to clip the unit on all four corners like that, and then we would reinstall that in the camera. So for a body filter mod, you end up with two pieces of glass permanently inside the camera body: the original front filter and the body DSLR replacement filter behind it, as opposed to a clear glass modification using an astronomic MC clear glass. Okay, with an MC clear glass, again, we're going to pop this metal frame off. Set the frame aside. Remove the front filter, which we're not going to use for a clear glass mod. And remove the body filter as well. Now we're left with the empty black plastic filter frame. With an astronomic clear glass modification, it's a much larger piece of glass than the body. It's also twice as thick as the body filter, so it's easier to handle for a modification. That's the size of the clear glass by Astronomic. So once it's cleaned, it just needs to be placed inside the filter frame, and no gluing is involved, in that you can just use the metal clip frame to snap it in place in all four corners, and that's what we end up with: clear glass modification with the Astronomic MC clear glass DSLR replacement. Now the Astronomic MC clear glass has been installed on the sensor, and we're just going to reinstall the two small screws that hold the metal frame onto the sensor. Okay, so we have all four screws in, and our Astronomic MC clear glass sensor is in position. We just need to install it now in the camera body. Okay, here's the T4i body, and this is the sensor. So we're going to place the sensor in its place inside the body. Like so. Now we just need to reinstall the three sensor screws, and so we'll put this one in first. Remember, again, put them in their correct position. Okay, there's one. Here's two. And here's the third. In the upper left, might have to move the top of the camera a little bit to get at this one. There we go. Now we got them close to where they should be, but using the marks, or the black lines that we drew on originally, along with our gauge strips, we'll return them to the original position. Okay, we're going to check all 3 torque screws to make sure we have the black lines lining up, and we do. And now we're also going to use our gauge strips and yeah, we have them back, the torque screws back to their original position at all 3 locations. Now for bottom modification, you're done at that point. For an astronomic MC clear glass, there's a slight adjustment we're going to need to make, and what I use is the Torx drive itself, and the Torx drive is laid out in with 6 points, and we need to make 1/12 of a turn inward. So I line up the Torx drive and then turn the Torx drive 1/2 of a tick inward, or clockwise. That's the same thing as 1/12 of a turn. And I'm going to have to do the same on this one. Okay, we're going to do 1/12 of a turn, or 1/2 tick. There it is. And then on the 3rd torque screw, again I'm going to do 1/2 of a tick turn. Now the 3 torque screws have been adjusted for accurate focus with the astronomic MC clear glass. Okay, with our torque screws in their correct position, we're going to add a small drop of glue to each head of the torque screw so that it stays in place. And the focus doesn't change over time. Okay, the next 3 screws we install are for the ground straps. One there, one here, and the 3rd one goes on a ground strap that the earlier Canon models don't have. Right there. All 3 are now installed. Now we'll install the top screws near the straps, and the long screw goes here. Tighten that, and the short screw goes on this side. Very good. Now we'll move to the front screws. The front screws are all the same size. 2 go at the top of the camera. Here's the other one. And 1 goes at the bottom of the camera. Right here. Next we will move to the 2 screws that go next to the battery door. The battery door screws are both the same size. 1 goes here, and the other here. Next, we need to put the camera back in its place, and that's going to involve reconnecting this white cable here, and I like to place it over where it needs to be. Just press it in place. Snaps in with my fingernail. And the other connector is just a push-on connector here. Easier to work from this side. Okay, there, I just pressed it in place so both cables are connected, and we just snap the back of the camera back in its position like that. Close the battery door. Now there are two screws that we install near the viewfinder. One there and one there. And then we turn the camera on its side and install the port cover. Just a matter of pushing it in place till it's fully in. And now we need to install the 4 torque screws to secure it. There's one. Here's the second. Third. And the last. Okay. The port cover is now secured. We'll go to the opposite side of the camera here, and we have 2 screws to install. The long one goes on top, and the short one goes on the bottom. Okay, now the only remaining screws left are at the bottom of the camera. We'll turn the camera like this. Okay, the last 4 screws go on the bottom of the camera, and the long one goes in first. And then there's 2 short ones in the middle. One there. And one here. And then the final screw. It's another long one. And we're done with reassembly of the camera. Now it's time to test the camera, make sure it's working. We'll open the SD card slot, put a SD card in, insert a battery, close the battery compartment, and now we'll turn it on. There you go. We're in business. We have a modified camera, and it's working. after you fully test the camera, then you could put the rubber gripping material pieces back on, and they're very easy to put on. They just go back in their original position, and there you go. There's that one on the side and this one on the back. Done. Put the viewfinder back on, viewfinder cover back on, and you have a full spectrum modified Canon T4i. With a full spectrum modified camera, it's then easy to add clip filters as needed for whatever type of imaging you're doing. This is an astronomic luminance UV-IR block filter, so we push it in there, it's held in by friction, and you're good to go.